And whenever I return from a 3 day holiday weekend, I always feel that I should probably have one of the best shows I will ever have because I am so well rested and I spend most of my time napping. All right, I was up and about and doing some other things too, but I do feel as if today we are being shot out of the cannon, and we have a 4 day week now. We've got a lot to get to. There are a lot of things that happened over the weekend. Would have been great to have a little extra time to talk about them, but I'm not going to argue with a 3 day weekend. They don't come along often enough. Want to thank you for joining us first of all this morning, and just to point out, we have a guest coming along in about 15 minutes. She's going to be talking with us just for a brief while, but about the Perrine Bridge Festival, which is on the way in just a few days. Later in the week, I'm going to have a gentleman joining us who's going to be talking with us about something that he's been working on for a very, very long time, and that is a memorial to his son. The fellow lost his son at war a few years ago and has been working on a war memorial in Jerome, and I believe that is coming up and a little bit later this week. I just have to finalize all of the details on that. I do want to say thank you, and thank you for joining us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And if you'd like to reach our program today, you can give me a shout a couple of different ways, actually by email, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com, or the telephone number is 736-0300. That is 736-0300. So just to let you know very quickly off the top of the show today, I just want to mention a couple of quick things, and we'll get back to this topic if we have a chance a little bit later in the program. This woman, Kim Davis, we spent some time talking about her last week, and a great many people in media, even conservative media, had been saying that she made the wrong decision. She should have just simply resigned her job when she could no longer follow the Supreme Court ruling paving the way for same-sex marriages, even though her state constitution still has not been cleared up about this matter. So she spent the weekend in jail plus a couple of other days, and it doesn't look like she's going to be getting out anytime soon. But the opinion, at least from people in conservative media and maybe people who are just mildly right of center, seems to be changing now, and perhaps what she has done is broken the ice. And that may mean that there are going to be other public servants and other people in public life who are soon going to be saying enough. And I noticed this subtle change over the weekend doing some reading of some various newspapers, op-ed pages and the like. And many people who were opposed to the stand that she had taken, many who were opposed to that early on, have flipped and they have gone over to the other side. One of them would be Father Dwight Longnecker, who, to my knowledge, is the only Roman Catholic priest who ever graduated from Bob Jones University. That's because he's run the gamut of Christian religious faith. But he was saying the other day that this woman should have just quit the job, walked away from it. What's the deal with the show? But now he says, after what he has seen over the course of the weekend, he says, she's in jail. Why is she in jail? She's in jail, he said, because clearly the goal is to start sending Christians, to criminalize Christianity, to send Christians off to the Huskow, when apparently the left doesn't get its way. I came across this too over the weekend. I know a handful of you still read the local rag. People over there aren't too pleased with me lately. They seem to think that I belittled them on the air one too many times. Well, they're the smartest people that walk into any room here in Twin Falls, so you have to understand their position. But when you actually give a little bit of it back to them, I think the word is petulant. I think that's the reaction I'm getting out of them. MagicValley.com, I printed this up yesterday, and it was an editorial from Sunday's newspaper. Our view, oaths still mean something in Idaho. The writer says, the judge had a little choice but to hold her accountable for failing to meet her responsibilities. It was the right decision. So they're telling you that it's a good thing this woman is in jail. But as I was reading this and going through all of this the other day, it struck me, how come they didn't have an editorial like this about sanctuary cities? How come they didn't have an editorial about this when the law of the land actually prohibited same-sex marriage, and yet certain public officials were going out and going ahead with that? How come all of a sudden now, a public official who says, no, I can't do this, how come that public official must go to jail? How come the people who run that sanctuary city in San Francisco or in Chicago, where they have a sanctuary city, heck, there are perhaps a few hundred of them now around the country. How come none of these people have to go to jail? How come when the mayor of San Francisco was marrying people a dozen years ago against the law, how come he didn't go to jail? Why all of a sudden is this newspaper? Because they always like to tell you that when it comes to their leftist viewpoint and their destruction of traditional American culture, that it's the right thing to do. That's the argument they make. Now, Kate Steinle, the woman who was just standing on a pier in San Francisco, when an illegal alien, half a dozen times deported, decided to shoot her in the head and kill her, apparently at random. You understand she was born white, so she was born an oppressor, according to this newspaper. The killer, though, even though he pulled the trigger and he had the stolen gun, and he had come back into this country numerous times after being deported, and already had a huge criminal record behind him, you see, he's a victim. So therefore, Kate Steinle, she's a dead oppressor, and the victim managed to give her just desserts. And when it comes to Johnny and Jimmy getting married, well, they're victims too. So that's why you have people who work at a place like the Times News who are going along with this saying, isn't it great that they're locking up Christian? I can't wait until we start doing that in Idaho. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Then I came across this over the weekend. A writer by the name of John, I think it's Brogian is how he pronounces it, spelled Brodgian. Christian and Muslim refuse to perform their jobs with different results. But you see, of course, Muslims are victims too. There's another person who also failed in her job duties, he writes, due to religious principles. In contrast, few people have heard her name. She isn't being demonized by the media. No one is screaming bigot or telling her to hush up and do her job or get another one. Her name is Cherie Stanley. She's a Muslim. These two cases provide a blatant example of a disturbing double standard within the country. Unfortunately, this is not the only evidence, he writes. I don't think that I should have to choose between practicing my religion properly or earning a living. I shouldn't have to choose between one or the other because they're both important, she went on to say. And she is a flight attendant, was working for an airline and said that she would not serve alcohol to passengers. So apparently she's had a falling out with the airline. She's now suing the airline. One big difference, the writer says, to be fair, being a public employee doesn't give you the same freedom as it would or should working in the public sector. But ask yourself this, would there be the same outrage had their religions been reversed, or would one not be in jail while the other's former employer was being boycotted? Well, as a Christian, if you refuse to bake Johnny and Jimmy a cake, you could go to jail or be fined. If you refuse to take their photographs at their wedding, while there are other photographers who might, you could be jailed or fined, right? You understand how all of this works. I'm just sharing with you, if you were a Christian on that same airplane, they'd probably throw the book at you. And here you go. You've got a Muslim who says, I can't do it, and will likely sue the airline and walk away with a massive, massive payday before all of it happens to be over with. There's more on this. I've got to keep sharing some of these things. This comes from LifeSite News, which is a great website, I should point out. Some friends of mine turned me onto it many, many years ago. The headline says, Kim Davis jailing only beginning of what is in store for America, as revealed in June 27 Gay Magazine. Most pro-family people didn't see the chilling article that appeared in The Nation, a major left-wing magazine, the day before the U.S. Supreme Court ruling came out. The article outlines where the LGBT movement is going after gay marriage. I always thought that was like a sandwich. No, that's BLT, isn't it? Well, of course, the Muslims wouldn't want that either for obvious reasons. The Nation article, What's Next for the LGBT Movement, quotes 4 high-profile activists who reveal that gay marriage was never their final goal. The movement will not be stopping to rest, they say. Their plan is to delegitimize and crush all opposition to their agenda everywhere in America, in particular the churches, no matter how small. They want to disestablish marriage. They want to pass strong LGBT non-discrimination laws. They want to ban all religious liberty laws. They want to demonize pro-family conservatives and silence all dissent. They are pushing a radical political agenda. Now, I would not have thought this was true, but yesterday I had something posted on my Facebook page, and somebody I know who happens to be involved in a same-sex marriage, somebody I happen to know when I was still working on the other end of the country, made a couple of comments. Well, when that happens, that allows his Facebook friends, most of whom have rainbow flags as their icons on Facebook, they're then allowed to see what's going on. And then they all started chiming in, saying, we pretty much need to get rid of religion in this country. In fact, some of them went on to say the only religious faith that we should keep is Quakerism. In other words, because Quakerism says, don't worry about it, anything goes. I think they would probably also accept Unitarian, Universalist, and the like, because once again, it all comes down to I'm okay, you're okay. That's a simple interpretation of Christian faith from the far left. Last month, of course, the Denver City Council moved to remove or deny Chick-fil-A access to space restaurant space in the Denver airport. Why? Because the owner of the company, Dan Cathy and his family, privately held company, are Christians who don't believe in a lot of these new changes, these newfangled rules and changes that we're seeing across this country. So there you go. You've got these people who are just simply, that is the overall. It's not really even about their sexual relationships or their sexual habits. It's about getting rid of religious faith altogether. And then they can have just one great big bacchanalia. And they can go out and they can recruit your family, your children. We are definitely headed. You want to talk about a regression. Throughout history, we've always had the belief that cultures, they got better, that they improved. Well, that's not the case. Do you know what we're seeing right now? We are seeing people, and their obvious goal at this point, their obvious goal is to turn the clock back, to establish a Sodom and Gomorrah between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans on a massive, we should point out, massive scale. Now, I don't know about you, but it's beginning to make me a little uncomfortable. This whole notion that we had to be tolerant and the like seems to me that we were being played the entire time that was going on. And I don't know at this point. Where do we go from here? Because we stood back and let it happen. We really don't have much of a beachhead left anymore. We're coming up on 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. 53. Looking for a high today somewhere in the 80s, and despite the fact that it was somewhat of a chilly weekend. Do you know it snowed near Pocatello on Saturday? Yeah, better there than here. But we're going to have temperatures back around the 90-degree range by the time we get into some parts of later this week or early next week. Hey, I've got a guest coming up, speaking with us about the Perrine Bridge Festival. That's on the way in just a couple of minutes.